I believed patience was a virtue, even when it required me to stay suspended in uncertainty. From the beginning, there were no clear definitions, no real labels, no solid future plans. But there was consistency in communication, emotional intimacy late at night, shared routines that slowly began to resemble a relationship. Whenever I felt confused, he reassured me without ever fully committing. He spoke in possibilities instead of decisions, and feelings instead of actions. And every time I tried to step back to protect myself, he pulled me closer again, not enough to move forward, but just enough to keep me from leaving. I learned how to live inside that in-between space, telling myself it was temporary, telling myself love wasn't supposed to be rigid. Years passed like that, quietly, almost invisibly. That is something people don't talk about enough, how time disappears inside relationships that never fully form. There are no dramatic fights, no explosive endings, no clear moment where you can point and say, that's when it went wrong. Instead, life continues while you wait. You wait for him to be ready, for circumstances to change, for the timing to improve. You wait while birthdays pass, while your needs mature, while your inner voice grows quieter. And somehow, waiting becomes your role. Without realizing it, I began to shape myself around the space he was willing to offer. I stopped asking questions that made him uncomfortable. I softened my expectations. I learned how to appear understanding even when I felt disappointed. I told myself that being flexible meant being loving, that not pressuring him meant respecting his process. On the outside, I looked calm, rational, emotionally intelligent. On the inside, I was negotiating with myself every day, convincing my heart to accept less than it wanted because walking away felt harder than staying. The most painful part wasn't neglect, it was invisibility. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being emotionally close to someone who never fully chooses you. You share your thoughts, your fears, your dreams, yet you remain optional. You are present, available, invested, while knowing deep down that if something better came along, you would have no claim to stand on. And still, I stayed. Not because I didn't see the imbalance, but because I believed that love, if given enough time and understanding, would eventually solidify. I didn't realize how much I was losing until I started losing myself. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, my confidence changed. I became less certain of what I deserved, less connected to my intuition. Whenever a feeling of discomfort surfaced, I rationalized it away. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was asking for too much, that relationships were complicated. I grew accustomed to emotional ambiguity, and that scared me more than any argument ever could have. Because ambiguity trains you to doubt your own needs. There was no single event that woke me up, no betrayal, no argument that finally broke everything open. What happened was quieter and in some ways more devastating. One morning, I realized I was exhausted, not physically, but emotionally. Tired of explaining my worth without saying it out loud. Tired of hoping someone would meet me where I already was. Tired of calling something love when it consistently asked me to shrink. That was the moment I understood that this wasn't a relationship struggling to grow. It was a situation that survived only because I kept abandoning myself. The truth I avoided for years became impossible to ignore. He wasn't confused, and he wasn't incapable of commitment. He was comfortable. Comfortable receiving love without responsibility, intimacy without accountability, presence without obligation. And I had helped maintain that comfort by staying quiet about what I truly wanted. I had loved his potential more than his reality, and potential, I learned too late, is a dangerous thing to fall in love with. Leaving didn't feel empowering at first. It felt empty. It felt like stepping out of a life I had built in my head rather than one that actually existed. There was grief, not just for him, but for the version of myself that believed patience would be rewarded, that loyalty would eventually be recognized. I mourned the years I had spent waiting, the energy I had poured into something that never fully chose me. And yet, beneath that grief, there was a subtle sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. As time passed, the silence I once feared began to feel like clarity. I started noticing how light my mind felt without constantly managing expectations, without interpreting mixed signals, without negotiating my worth internally. I realized how much emotional labor I had normalized, how much I had convinced myself that love was supposed to feel uncertain. Slowly, I began reconnecting with parts of myself that had gone quiet, my intuition, my confidence, my ability to imagine a future without hesitation. That's when I truly understood the danger of almost love. It doesn't break you suddenly. It teaches you to accept half measures politely. It convinces you that staying is safer than leaving, even as it quietly erodes your sense of self. And if this story feels uncomfortably familiar, it's not because you're weak or naive. It's because almost love feels safer than loneliness until you realize it costs you years you can never get back. If you're in something that almost chooses you, almost commits, almost shows up, I want you to ask yourself one honest question. How much longer are you willing to wait for someone to decide what you already know you deserve? Walking away isn't failure. Sometimes it's the first real act of self-respect. And if you're struggling to untangle yourself from a relationship like this, one built on emotional ambiguity, mixed signals, or subtle manipulation, I created an ebook to help guide that process with clarity and compassion. It's designed to help you recognize toxic patterns, rebuild boundaries, and choose yourself again without guilt. You can download it through the link in the description.